welcome to Thinking Solo, where we talk about ways to succeed in business and in life. I'm your host, Ryan DeRusso. I'm a fee-only financial advisor, and you can find me at thinkingcapfinancial.com. Today, we'll discuss something a little different because it's something that you may not even be aware exists, and that's called managing entrepreneur syndrome. It's something that you don't even know you are facing until you are 60 or 70 and you haven't saved anything, but you've invested in business after business after business, and you don't even realize that you need to address the issue. And so it's actually something that you need to be aware of when you're in your 40s and 50s before it gets to be a very serious situation in your 60s and 70s. Entrepreneur syndrome is when all you do is invest in business after business after business. In doing so, what you're often doing is creating value in income. You're creating a growth in income, but you're not necessarily creating long-term wealth unless you were able to sell one of your businesses for a significant chunk of money. And so where this becomes a real problem is later in life when either you're starting to slow down or you are considering retirement or a health concern pops up. Because now you have a business that may be pumping income. Like, I have clients with, many millions of dollars of income and revenue in a business. But if they're not saving and they're not creating value for themselves outside the business, then what can happen is you have a health scare. You can no longer run that business, and it's probably a small business. Maybe you're the only employee, maybe there's one or two employees, but it all runs through you, and now you cannot operate that business. And so your whole sort of net worth was wrapped up in the business. Now that business's income is going to plummet. And meanwhile, you don't have resources to protect yourself. Not to mention, the business now suffers. If you were planning on selling that business, then it won't be worth nearly as much as it was going to be if you were able to operate on a regular basis in the business. And so this creates a problem later in life, and it's really understandable of how it builds. When you're an entrepreneur or you run a solo business, you have a firm belief that you can turn $1 here into $2 or $3 or $4 here, and you can do it better than anything else that you're investing in. So you just continue to invest in you invest in the business and the business enterprises. And that can really work out. It can also not if those businesses don't eventually sell or you're not creating wealth outside of those businesses. What results oftentimes is that you create a lot of income, but very little security. And so when the business security goes, your income goes, your protection grows, and it can create a real dire situation. And so you need to protect against this. And that's really what I want to discuss today. It's sort of how to protect against that natural urge to only invest in the business and only try and grow the business. The first way to protect is through diversification. When we are only investing in ourselves, we're creating value in one place, ourselves, our business, our income. So that is growing, and that may look great on paper and it may look impressive come tax time, but if you are not then taking those funds and moving them elsewhere and extending out where those investments are going, it can leave you in that real dire situation where if something happens to the head of the snake, i.e. you, then the body has nowhere to go and you are left with nothing. And so we need to diversify, not just in investing in other businesses that we may have access to, but also in the types of investments that we're doing. So whether that's investing in the markets or investing in real estate or other types of investing, we need to extend out that reach so we're not reliant on just what we make ourselves. And that will create real security especially as time goes on and the number of protections you built grow over time. The second thing we need to do is create tax advantages for ourselves within the business. And this ensures that we're keeping a lot more of that income. We're taking, $500, $600, $700,000 in net income, and we're now capturing hundreds to 200,000 of that, but not having to pay taxes on it today. Because your income is so high today in those cases that you want to actually push down the tax bill to a future date. And that's really where retirement planning and retirement tools like a 401k or a cash balance plan or something along those lines, which is essentially a type of pension, something along those lines that you can put money into, store, and let that grow over time will ensure that you are now not just building something within the business, you're actually capturing more of the money within the business. It's now outside the business and growing and working for you elsewhere for a future time period where maybe the business is not the central focus. And that can not only create value today because you're not paying as much in taxes, but it creates value long term because now you have a protective tool. And ideally, when you're in retirement, your income drops. And so now you're paying less in taxes over time. So both have real value and real benefits. Third thing is we need to build beyond you. So if you are a solo business owner who is sole set on just investing in their business, then you need to create a business that can go beyond you. And that's really hard to do in just a one person situation. If you have a patent of some sort or a specific site that can live beyond you because of what it offers and what it brings and that sort of thing, then it's possible. It's just that's not the norm. And so we need to grow something that can be sold and eventually pass on beyond you so you can sell it at a time when you are in a position of strength. Because selling when you are late in life and ill of health and or gone because you never were able to sell beforehand, that is not a position of strength. That is how you really decrease the value of the sale of the business. Instead, selling when you are in a place where you can negotiate terms and create real or show real value because you know the business so well, that's going to make it so much easier come sell time than your significant other trying to sell it or you selling it while you, after you've had, let's say, a stroke and struggle to get through the day without feeling very, very tired. Like a buyer is going to see that, recognize that, and negotiate with that knowledge. And we want to avoid that. So we have to build beyond you in order to make sure that it can be sold. And that includes other employees potentially, that includes other resources, that includes many other things that you may not think about because you are operating the business as just you. But if you're thinking bigger, then we need to imagine a bigger entity and what that looks like. Finally, the fourth thing you need to do within the business is start building protections within the business. And so some of this can be what we've already talked about between diversification and tax advantage investing and building barriers and people beyond you to run the business, but it's also ensuring that you have protections in case something happens to you, whether that's long-term disability, if you have children, whether that's term life insurance or other things that, when life happens, i.e. an injury or something like that, well, you are still getting income, even if the business suffers because you are no longer in operation. Well, you still have protection in place. And that's going to be really important, especially if you are very late in the game to saving and investing, to also include that sort of layer of protection just while you build up resources for longer term needs through like retirement goals and whatnot. And that's really what insurance is. We're passing off the risk of something happening that we cannot afford, i.e. If you are a young parent and need to buy term life insurance, an untimely death within the family, we're passing that off and we're saying, insurance company, please take that risk for us. And that's what we're paying for. And that's why we may need it if you are a business owner and low on other resources at the moment. Putting those four things together is going to be real key to this overall picture of your business. It's going to make your current business stronger, but it's also going to help you operate outside of the business a bit more, so you are not so wrapped up in the success or the lack thereof of one entity. Instead, you're building multiple entities for your strength, and that's going to make you wealthier. It's going to make you positioned more strongly when you're negotiating, when you're operating on a day-to-day basis, and it will make you feel more relaxed because now you're not so concerned about what happens if I don't make my numbers this month or next month or etc. Today's movie review is Raiders of the Lost Ark. Now, I am sure most of you listening to this have actually seen this movie. This is a classic from 1981, Steven Spielberg, Indiana Jones, written by George Lucas. So this is very famous, and most of the people that would be watching this will have seen Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark. But I just want to talk about it because I recently went on a little vacation with my kids, and we were watching it in the evening before bed, and I just it really holds up so well, and there's some really characteristics that I wanted to kind of draw upon. But you know the story. So an archaeologist is in pursuit against the Nazis to recover the Ark of the Covenant. And really what kind of struck me in terms of just the overall comparison to entrepreneurs is just the Indiana Jones and his personality comparison, because he is all action. He sees something that he wants and he goes for it. And it's so comparable to what we see in entrepreneurs on a regular basis. And he's working often alone or with one person's help, or as needed help. And while he may have a large university behind him or a large museum behind him, on the ground it's really just him kind of winging it. And I mean, I think the appeal of Indiana Jones over the years is just not only that he's supposed to be this somewhat suave person, but he's also real clumsy and finds himself it's not like a James Bond action figure, but instead he's kind of fumbling his way through scenarios and whatnot and coming out in the end. So it creates humor as well as action, which, a great combination when you're comparing it to the mythology and backstory of the archaeologist. So it really, I can understand why it's become a classic, partly because of that. But from an entrepreneur's perspective, when you look at Indiana Jones, I feel like you see the glint in the eye in many entrepreneurs that you see in Harrison Ford as that character. And so the fact, for those who are loving, running a business and whatnot, I think they probably have not only seen this movie, but enjoy it many times over. But you can also understand why it is a classic. You have the charisma of Harrison Ford, the uniqueness of the story, the wonder built around that object, the Ark of the Covenant, and all of that combined, including interesting settings, some that don't hold up all that well in today's eyes, but still very interesting settings that it makes for a story that really lasts and really connects, and it's very watchable even to this day, even if some of the graphics, don't necessarily hold up quite as strongly as they used to, but still very, very watchable and still very, very enjoyable. And, you see it in some classic scenes where there isn't the CGI happening, where they're crossing through canyons and deserts, between where Indiana Jones is compared to where the Nazis are on the screen. One is high above, one is way below, and the power dynamics that are constantly fluctuating depending on who has the covenant and who has the negotiating power. It makes for a very enjoyable and up and down watch. So definitely strongly recommend rewatching that one if you haven't recently. That's the show for today. Again, you can find me on YouTube at Thinking Solo, and I'm on LinkedIn under my name, Ryan DeRusso. Be sure to subscribe, and I'll speak to you next time. In the meantime, keep grinding.